What you have been consuming is not nourishing you. This is the thing that needs to be said clearly before anything else is said. Because the clarity of it is the beginning of everything that changes tonight. What you have been taking in, what you have been returning to, regularly, reliably, in the specific rhythm of a person who does not know yet that what they are consuming is the source of the depletion rather than the remedy for it, is the thing that has been keeping you smaller than you are, keeping you in the reaching for rather than the having of, keeping the interior compass slightly off its true orientation, keeping the gap between what you sense about yourself and what you allow yourself to claim as real. You are going to stop consuming it tonight, not because you are told to stop, because once it is named clearly for what it is, once the specific quality of what it does to the interior of a person who has been ingesting it across the years of their life is described precisely, the consuming becomes difficult to continue in the same unconscious way it has been continuing. The naming changes the relationship to the thing named. What you have been taking in without knowing what it was cannot be taken in without knowing after it has been named, and it is going to be named here. The thing you need to stop consuming tonight is other people's account of what you are, not the loving account, not the recognition offered by people who see clearly and speak from the genuine interior of what they actually perceive in you. The account offered by people and systems that have a specific interest in the account they are offering, that have a specific need for you to receive their account of what you are as accurate and to organize your life around the version of yourself it describes. This account has been offered to you continuously, in the institutional versions, the evaluations and the assessments and the official determinations of what you are worth and what you are capable of and what the appropriate dimensions of your ambition should be. In the relational versions, the feedback from people whose own sense of themselves required your smallness to be comfortable, who offered you the account of yourself that served their need rather than your reality. In the cultural versions, the omnipresent ambient messaging about who gets to be what and on what basis and under what conditions and with what credentials and through what processes. All of it organized around the production of a specific interior understanding of your place in the available range of things a person like you can be. The account is comprehensive. It has been delivered in every register of your experience. It is not the product of any single person's malice. Most of the people who have delivered it have been delivering it genuinely, meaning they have genuinely believed the account they were offering because the account they were offering is the one they were taught to offer and have never had sufficient reason to question. The account is not usually delivered as a lie. It is delivered as the consensus of what is visible to the people inside the systems that produced the account. What is visible to them is what their systems were built to see. And their systems were not built to see what you actually carry. Write 111 in the comments right now if you have been consuming this account for long enough that there are nights when you cannot immediately tell where their account of you ends and your own knowing of yourself begins. If the line between what you sense and what you have been told to sense has become genuinely unclear in certain moments, that is what the sustained consumption of someone else's account does to the interior over time. The line blurs. The naming makes it clear again. Write 111 and begin the clearing. The specific content of what needs to be stopped tonight is worth identifying in the precise forms it takes. Because the general instruction to stop consuming what is depleting you is not as useful as the specific recognition of what the depletion actually looks like in the texture of daily experience. The first thing to stop consuming is the measure, the specific yardstick, inherited from the systems that produced it, passed through every institution you have moved through, installed so early that it feels like the natural metric rather than a constructed one, that tells you how much of what you are is enough. The measure always produces insufficiency. This is not accidental. The measure was built to produce insufficiency because insufficiency is the productive interior state for a person who is supposed to be motivated to achieve more within the system the measure serves. A person who feels sufficient does not continue seeking the system's confirmation of their sufficiency. A person who always feels slightly short of the measure keeps seeking, keeps consuming the system's account of what they would be if they measured up, keeps organized around the gap rather than the having of. You are not insufficient by the measure that actually applies to what you are. You are, by that measure, complete. The incompleteness is the measure's product. The measure itself is the thing to stop consuming, the specific, ongoing, automatic application of the external yardstick to the interior reality that cannot be accurately measured by any external yardstick. The second thing to stop consuming is the waiting, the specific form of deferred living that the consumption of the other account produces, the organization of the present around a future moment when the conditions for the full inhabiting of what you actually are will finally be in place, when the recognition will arrive, when the circumstances will align, when the external confirmation will reach the level that feels sufficient to authorize the full expression. When whatever is currently preventing the complete claiming of what you are will have resolved itself enough that the claiming feels warranted. The waiting is itself a form of the consumption. It is the ingestion of the account that says the full expression is not yet appropriate, that the conditions for it are not yet present, that something still needs to happen before what you carry can be given to the world at the volume it naturally carries at. The waiting as consumption produces the same depletion that the measure as consumption produces, in the specific form of a life organized around the almost there rather than the actually here, around the approaching arrival rather than the completed one. The arrival is complete. The full expression is appropriate now. The conditions are the conditions that are always present when the genuine thing is ready to be expressed. The conditions of the interior being what it is and the world having a genuine need for what the interior carries. Both conditions have been met for longer than the waiting has acknowledged. The waiting is the consumption. Stopping the waiting is the stopping of the consumption. The third thing to stop consuming is the comparison. The specific, automatic, thoroughly installed habit of measuring what you carry against what other people carry and finding in the comparison a verdict on the relative significance of what you carry. The comparison is always unfair to you in the same direction. It is always comparing your interior knowing, which has no external markers and no visible validation and no institutional backing, against someone else's external markers, which are visible and validated and institutionally backed. The comparison is between the real thing in its unverified form and the managed version in its fully verified form. The real thing loses that comparison every time because the comparison is not designed to measure what the real thing is. It is designed to measure what the system rewards. And the system rewards the visible, the credentialed, the institutionally recognized. The real thing is none of those things and does not need to be any of those things to be what it is. Stop consuming the comparison. What you carry does not become more or less real by the outcome of a comparison that was built around the wrong measure. It is what it is independent of the comparison. The comparison is the consumption. Stopping the comparison is stopping the consumption. There is a specific quality of depletion that the consumption of what needs to be stopped tonight produces. Not the dramatic depletion of obvious harm, not the sharp, visible, clearly attributable kind of diminishment that a person can point to and say, this is what happened to me and this is what caused it. The depletion is slow, ambient, occurring below the threshold where most people register depletion until it has accumulated to the point of its effects being undeniable. The effects are in the quality of the morning, the specific quality of how you begin the day, whether what is present at the beginning of the day is something that feels like yours, that feels like the expression of what you actually are, or something that feels like the preparation for the performance of a version of yourself that the day will require. The consumption of the other account produces the second quality, the morning organized around the performance rather than the expression. The sense of the day being a space in which you will be assessed against the measure, will be compared against others, will be found whatever the comparison and the measure determine you to be found. That quality of morning is the depletion being visible at its first daily expression, not dramatic, a slight flatness, a slight grayness in the prospect of the day, the specific muting of the anticipation that should accompany the prospect of a day in which the full expression of what you carry is going to be given to the world in each encounter. Instead of the anticipation, the sense of the management of the day rather than the living of it. The depletion is also visible in the quality of the encounters, in what you bring to the conversations that matter most, in whether what you bring is the genuine version, your actual perception, your real knowing, the full quality of what you carry in the specific form it is in today, or the calibrated version. The version that has been assessed against the other account and found appropriate to offer in the specific context of the specific conversation with the specific person whose account of you is one of the accounts you have been consuming. The calibrated version is the product of the consumption. The genuine version is what becomes available when the consumption stops. The depletion is visible in the dreams, if you pay attention to the dreams, in the recurring quality of what the dreaming interior produces when it is processing the gap between what you know yourself to be and what you have been allowing yourself to claim. The dreaming interior is not fooled by the consumption. It knows the difference between the real account and the other account, and the processing of the gap, the ongoing nightly work of the interior trying to reconcile what it knows with what it is being permitted to express, has a quality that accumulates, that builds, that is trying to tell you, in the language of the sleeping interior, what the waking exterior is not allowing itself to hear. The dreams are trying to tell you to stop. Tonight, the stopping begins. Subscribe now if this channel is where the stopping begins, where the consumption is named and the naming initiates the discontinuation, where what has been depleting you is identified in the precise form it takes in your experience rather than in the abstract form that cannot initiate anything real. Stay inside this. The nourishment that replaces what is stopped tonight is what this channel carries. The reason tonight is the night to stop, specifically tonight, rather than another night, rather than the vague future moment when conditions for stopping will be better aligned, is not arbitrary. It is the specific convergence of the arc of your development and the state of the world and the completion of what the years were building that makes tonight the only accurate moment for the stopping to begin. The consumption has been possible for all the previous nights because the alternative was not available in the form it needed to be available in to be genuinely nourishing. You cannot stop consuming what depletes you without access to what sustains you. And the access requires the specific interior preparation that the years have been providing. The preparation required the full arc to complete. The full arc has completed. The alternative is now available in the form it needed to be in the form of what you actually are. At the specific depth and clarity and completeness that the years produced, and the availability of the genuine alternative is what makes the stopping of the other thing genuinely possible rather than simply effortful. Before tonight, the stopping was an effort of will, the withholding of the other account required continuous, conscious, exhausting resistance against its continuous, comprehensive, institutionally supported delivery. You cannot simply decide not to consume what is being delivered in every register of your experience through every channel that your existence is organized around. The decision requires the alternative to be as present and as available and as genuinely nourishing as the other account is comprehensively delivered. Without the alternative at that presence and availability, The stopping is just the hunger of the person who has been removed from the only food source they have known without access to what can genuinely feed them. The alternative is here now, is what you are now, in the completed form, is the real account, your own interior knowing of what you carry and what you are and what the years produced and what the world receives from the fact of your existence in it at full expression, in the form that can be genuinely consumed, that can genuinely nourish, that provides the interior with what it was reaching for when it was reaching for the other account's confirmation, which was always just the real account in a form it did not know how to generate for itself because the full arc had not yet completed the interior that is capable of providing it. The completed interior is the alternative, the full and genuine and unmanaged interior knowing of what you are, available to you now, accessible in the moments when you stop consuming the other account long enough to hear what your own interior has been trying to say throughout the years of the consumption, is what replaces what needs to stop tonight. This is the nourishment, not external, not the recognition from the outside that the other account was training you to wait for, the recognition from the inside. The genuine interior's account of what it is and what it carries and what it has always known about itself that the years of the other account's consumption were making harder to hear. Tonight, stop consuming the external account. Begin receiving the interior one. That is the stopping and that is the starting and they are the same movement. What the stopping produces in the first period following it is something that needs to be understood before the stopping can be inhabited, without the specific disorientation that arises when a person removes a long-standing consumption without being prepared for what the removal produces. The first thing it produces is silence, not the comfortable silence of a space that was always quiet. The particular silence of a space that was previously occupied by something that is now absent. The other account was noise, continuous, ambient, comprehensively delivered noise that the interior had become so accustomed to that it was no longer registering it as noise but as the baseline quality of experience. The removal of the noise is initially not experienced as the relief of the quiet. It is experienced as the strangeness of the absence, the particular quality of a room that has had something removed from it, visible in the different quality of the air, in the specific sense of something that was always present being no longer present, in the disorientation of a nervous system that was organized around the noise having to reorganize around its absence. Stay in the silence. Do not reach back toward the noise to resolve the strangeness of its absence. The strangeness is temporary. The silence is what becomes available when the strangeness passes. The silence is where the interior account is most clearly audible, the voice that has been speaking underneath the noise of the other account for the full duration of the consumption. That has been trying to be heard. That has been carrying what the interior actually knows about what you are and what you carry and what the genuine account says about all of it. The silence is where you finally hear it. The second thing the stopping produces is a specific kind of hunger. Not the hunger of deprivation, not the sensation of lacking something that was genuinely nourishing. The hunger of a body that was consuming something that was filling it without feeding it. That is now empty of what was filling it and is for the first time in a long time in contact with the actual sensation of genuine hunger for genuine nourishment. The hunger that knows what it is hungry for rather than the satiation of the person who is full of what does not feed them. This hunger is the beginning of the genuine receiving. It is the interior reaching for the real account. For the genuine version of its own worth and its own knowing and its own significance in the form that the interior itself carries rather than the form that the external account was delivering. The hunger for the real account is the beginning of the reception of it, and the reception, the genuine taking in of what the interior actually knows about what you are, is the nourishment that the stopping makes available. The third thing the stopping produces is clarity. the specific quality of the interior that is no longer organized around the management of the gap between the other account and the real account, the gap that required continuous interior work to navigate, the ongoing reconciliation of what was being consumed with what was being sensed, the sustained effort of a person trying to make the incompatible accounts coherent. The gap required work. The work consumed resources. The stopping of the consumption closes the gap. The closing of the gap releases the resources. The resources, released from the work of the gap, become available for the clarity. The clarity is not new information. It is the existing information, freed from the noise that was making it difficult to hear. Your interior already knows everything that the clarity reveals. The clarity is simply what your interior knowing sounds like when the noise of the other account is no longer competing with it for the attention of the interior. What was always there, finally audible. Write 222 in the comments if you can already feel the beginning of the clarity as you read this. If something is quieting in you, if the specific noise that has been running below the threshold of full conscious awareness, for the full duration of the consumption, is finding its volume reduced by the naming and the naming's initiation of the stopping. The reduction of the noise is the beginning of the clarity. Write 222, because the clarity is arriving. Here is what is possible tonight in the specific hours that follow the decision to stop consuming what needs to be stopped. Not in the abstract, in the precise, interior, directly experienceable form of what the stopping makes available in the hours immediately following. The hours of tonight, after the stopping has begun, are available for the first genuine reception of the real account in the form that the interior itself carries. This is a different quality of experience from the ordinary quality of a night. The ordinary night is organized around whatever the day produced and whatever the following day is anticipated to require. The night after the stopping is organized around neither of those things. It is organized around the interior having the space, for the first time in however long the consumption has been ongoing, to speak without the competition of the other account. What the interior will say, in that space, is not dramatic, will not arrive in the form of revelation or insight or the dramatic clarity of a person who has just discovered something that changes everything in a single moment. It will arrive quietly, as a quality of knowing that is simply present, simply available, simply audible in a way it was not audible before the space was created, a knowing that was always there, that the consumption was making difficult to hear, that is now speaking at its natural volume in a space that no longer contains the noise that was drowning it. The knowing, audible in the space the stopping creates, says the things your interior has been trying to say for the duration of the consumption, the things the real account contains, the account of what you actually carry, what the years actually produced, what the genuine interior actually knows about what you are. These things do not require the consumption of the other account to be true, they have always been true. The stopping only makes them audible. The audibility is what changes tonight. Let the interior speak tonight. Create the space for it, the specific quality of quiet that is not the absence of thought but the absence of the managed thought, the organized around the other account thought, the thought that is processing the consumption rather than receiving what the interior is trying to say, the quiet of the genuine receiving. The interior has been patient through the full duration of the consumption. It has been saying what it has to say underneath the noise for all of that time. Tonight the noise is reduced. Tonight the saying is more audible. Tonight you finally hear it clearly. There are specific forms the consumption takes that need to be named precisely because the general description of what needs to stop is not as useful as the specific identification of the moments when the consuming is happening. The consuming happens in specific moments. Knowing which moments is the knowledge that makes the stopping possible in the actual texture of daily experience rather than only in the abstract. The first specific moment is the moment of encountering the evidence of someone else's recognition. When you see the external acknowledgement of someone whose depth is less than yours but whose institutional position is greater. When the award, the platform, the byline, the title, the assembled audience belongs to someone who you know, in the interior that knows these things, is carrying a less real version of what you carry. The moment you encounter that evidence and feel the specific interior movement that the encounter produces, the comparison, the verdict, the conclusion about what the gap between their recognition and your recognition means about what you carry, that moment is the moment of the consuming. The consuming is the swallowing of the conclusion, the swallowing of the other account's verdict, delivered through the comparison, about what the gap means. The moment is identifiable. The specific quality of what happens in you when you encounter that evidence is recognizable once you know to recognize it. The slight deflation, the specific quality of the interior that was at a certain level and has dropped by a certain amount in response to the encounter. That dropping is the swallowing. That swallowing is the consuming. And the consuming, in that specific moment, is the one to stop. Not by refusing to notice what you notice. You notice what you notice and the noticing is not the problem. The consuming is the swallowing of the conclusion that the noticing is supposed to produce. The conclusion that the gap in recognition is the verdict on the gap in worth. The conclusion is not required by the noticing. The noticing can happen without the conclusion. The comparison can be made without the verdict. The evidence can be encountered without the swallowing of what the other account says the evidence means. The second specific moment is the moment of the question. The specific questions that other people ask that are not information-seeking but worth assessing. The questions that are framed as interest but function as the delivery of the measure. What do you do? Where did you study? How many people follow you? What have you produced that I would have heard of? These questions are the measure arriving in conversational form. The consuming is the answering of them from inside the other account, the organizing of the answer around the gap between what the measure requires and what you have to offer in its terms. The stop is not the refusal to answer. It is the answering from the interior account rather than the other one. The answering that comes from the real knowing of what you do and what you have produced and what the following represents and what the studying produced, the answering that does not organize itself around the gap between what you have and what the measure values but around the direct, unmanaged account of what is actually there. The answering from the completed interior rather than from the interior organized around the measure's assessment of the completed interior. The third specific moment is the moment of the end of the day, the specific quality of the review that happens as the day closes, the automatic, below-conscious assessment of the day against the other account standards, whether the day produced enough of what the measure requires, whether the encounters were sufficient, whether the performance of the calibrated version was adequate, whether the gap is larger or smaller than it was this morning. The consuming in this moment is the most sustained and least visible of the daily consumptions. It happens in the last waking moments. It shapes the quality of the sleep. It determines the quality of the morning that follows. Stop the end-of-day consuming. Replace it with the end-of-day receiving, the specific quality of looking at the day from the interior account rather than the other one. Not what the measure says the day produced. What the interior knows the day was. The encounters that were genuine. The moments where what you carry was present at full expression. The specific people in whom something shifted because of what you brought to the meeting. The quality of what was given and what was received. The account that the interior carries of the day rather than the account that the measure delivers. That account is nourishing. The other one is the consumption. The stopping is the replacement of the measuring account with the interior one as the daily closing ritual. Tonight, beginning in the hours before sleep that are the most open to what the interior has to say when the noise is reduced. The people who benefit from the consumption continuing would prefer that tonight not happen, that the stopping not begin, that the naming of what has been consumed not change the relationship to the consumption the way naming always changes the relationship to what is named. These are not necessarily people with conscious malice toward you. Most of them are simply organized around a way of existing in the world that requires the people around them to be consuming what you are stopping consuming, requires the measure to be operative, requires the waiting to continue, requires the comparison to produce the verdict that keeps you organized around the gap rather than the having of. Their way of existing produces the consumption in the people around them not through deliberate design but through the simple operation of a system that requires a specific interior condition in the people inside it. The system requires the interior condition of not quite enough, of almost but not yet, of the approaching arrival that is never quite arriving. The system is not functional in the presence of the interior condition of complete, of the person who has stopped consuming what produces the insufficiency and has begun receiving the genuine account of what they are. The complete person is not organized around the measure, does not continue seeking the system's confirmation of their worth, does not wait for the circumstances to authorize the full expression, is not producing the gap that the system's functioning requires. You have been inside systems that require your almostness, that are built around it, that would be significantly disrupted by your completeness. The stopping of the consumption tonight is the beginning of the completeness, and the beginning of the completeness is the beginning of your becoming genuinely disruptive to every system that was built around your almostness. This is what the consuming was preventing, not your awareness of the systems. The systems do not require your unawareness to function. They require your ongoing insufficiency, your continued consumption of the account that produces the insufficiency. The consumption was the instrument of the system's maintenance of what it needed. The stopping is the instrument of the maintenance's dissolution. Stop tonight, not for the system's sake. They are not the audience for this decision. For yours. For the specific quality of life that becomes available when the interior is receiving the real account rather than the other one. For the nourishment that the stopping makes space for. For the clarity that the silence produces. For the genuine account of what you are, audible in the space the stopping creates. Finally heard in the form it has always been available in. Finally given the full weight that the real account has always deserved and that the consumption was always preventing from being given. Tonight. The stopping is tonight, because tonight is when the interior account is ready to be received without the competition of the noise. Because tonight is when what the years produced is complete enough to nourish without the supplementation of the other account. Because tonight is when the genuine alternative is fully available and the stopping of the other thing is no longer the hunger of the person removed from the only food source they have known but the relief of a person who has found what actually feeds them and no longer needs what was only filling the space where nourishment belongs. Don't consume what depletes you tonight. Consume what the interior has been carrying for you instead. It has been keeping it. Through all the years of the other consumption, holding the real account intact, underneath the noise, waiting for the night when the noise would be reduced enough that the real account could finally be heard clearly enough to be received. That night is tonight. The account is ready. You are ready. The receiving begins. What is being asked of you tonight is not heroic. This is important to hold because the instruction to stop consuming what has been depleting. You can arrive with the weight of a demand for a significant change in the structure of a life. And significant changes in the structure of a life require significant effort and significant, sustained will and the specific kind of determination that burns at a level that is not maintainable indefinitely. The instruction is not asking for that. What is being asked is smaller and more specific and more immediately available. It is being asked that tonight, in the specific hours of tonight, you take in less of the other account than you usually take in. Not none. The removal of every intake of the other account in a single evening is not the realistic or the necessary version of the stopping. Less, deliberately, consciously, in the specific moments when the consuming would ordinarily occur without the deliberateness, choosing to reach for the interior account rather than the other one. Less tonight, less tomorrow, less the day after. The reduction is the stopping, practiced across the days that follow in the specific moments where the consuming ordinarily occurs. The stopping is not a single act of will sustained indefinitely. It is a practice, the practice of choosing, in each moment where the consuming offers itself, the alternative, and the alternative becomes more available with each choosing of it, in the way that all genuine things become more available through genuine contact with them. The practice of receiving the interior account strengthens the interior account's audibility. Each reception makes the next reception clearer, easier, more immediately available as the natural alternative to what the consumption offered. The stopping builds itself through the practicing of it. The first night is the beginning. The beginning is smaller than the completion. The beginning is simply less. Less of the measure, less of the waiting, less of the comparison, more of the quiet, more of the interior speaking, more of the real account being received in the moments where the other account ordinarily fills the space. Tonight is the first night, not because anything outside has changed, the measure is still being delivered by the systems that deliver it. The comparison is still available in every encounter with the evidence of other people's institutional recognition. The end-of-day assessment is still waiting at the end of today as it has been waiting at the end of every day. Everything outside is the same as it was before this was read. What has changed is inside, the naming, the specific recognition of what the consumption is and what it does and what the alternative is and how the alternative is accessed. This recognition changes the relationship to the consumption in the same way that all recognition changes relationships, not by removing what is recognized from the world, but by removing the invisibility that allowed it to operate without the friction of awareness. The consumption was able to produce what it produced because it was occurring, without the awareness that changes how a person relates to what they are taking in. The awareness is here now, and the awareness, brought to each specific moment of the consuming, is the beginning of the reduction that is the beginning of the stopping. Tonight you know what you have been consuming. The knowing is the first nourishment. It changes everything that comes after it, one specific moment at a time. Click on the video appearing on your screen now. What comes next is the specific account of what the genuine interior nourishment feels like in the days that follow the night of the stopping. How the clarity builds. How the morning quality changes. How the encounters change when what you are bringing to them is the genuine account rather than the calibrated version. How the world responds when you are feeding on what actually feeds you rather than what only fills the space where nourishment belongs. Click now. Tonight the consuming changes. Everything else follows from that.